what I called this was station layout and design. And again, it's somewhat simple, but it boils down to five different areas really: how you feel physically, what makes life a little easier for you, how well you can see in your ham shack, sound, ergonomics, and safety. Those are what I found were the five areas that I wanted to concentrate on. Uh, there we go. If you're going to operate for any period of time, you just want to be comfortable doing it. And so the more comfortable you feel, the easier things are going to be, and probably the more efficient you're going to be. One of the things is chairs. The chair has to feel good to one of those things. Probably the best thing is you don't want necessarily like going to an extreme like a lazy boy type of chair because it just doesn't give you enough back support or seat support. So what I found was looking for a chair that was relatively firm. You could sit in, it didn't make you tired, and that was probably one of the big things. Now, with that being said, I also thought about, well, what are some other issues that I've had in the past and other people may have? One was I don't want to necessarily be laying with my back totally against the back of the chair because usually when you're a little intensive on things and you're moving forward and you're typing on your keyboard or writing it down on paper, now you don't have any back support. So one of the things that I'll do is I'll just use a pillow right here, and that'll help give you some back support so your back doesn't get so tired. The other problem, and I have this issue, is my feet get cold. And even though the floor is tiled, it really doesn't kind of keep the cold from maybe going into your feet a bit. So what I did was I got these off of Amazon. They're not real heavy, but they're moving blankets. And so I got a moving blanket and I got it down on the floor. And this part here, you can see my mouse, right? Okay. So, and this is my push to talk pedal. But just by having your feet off of the, whether it be cement or tile floor, any hard surface, will keep them a little bit warmer. And I just have that issue to deal with. So I just took the things that bother me and try to make accommodations for them. I don't know if you ever look like this after operating from a long time. Maybe coming out of a bar some night when you were younger, you might have, but in general, I don't want to look like that. And so now we're dealing with the subject of sight. The big thing is probably the lighting and how your lighting is. Again, going back to past experience, when I was in the unfinished basement with the cement floor and everything, that was still where they just had regular um, light bulbs. You know, you had about maybe six in your basement or something, but it was always behind me. No matter what I did, kind of, it was always behind me. And it really irritated me and just made it hard for me because I always had this front shadow from my head with the light being behind me. And it was just an irritant more than anything. So I looked at it and said, well, what do we do? Well, some people will take and they'll just use some indirect lighting. So you don't have it behind you at all, but it's kind of shining on a wall. And by the time you get down to your keyboard and radio, you got really pretty even illumination, and that'll help get rid of any problems or shadows. There's another way to do it, and this is another picture of it, even though I did use a flash. But the point would be that you use that lighting and try to get the lighting a little bit in front of you, not behind you, and you won't have the shadows. Here's my setup, and I'll show you. Um, if you notice, look at the shadows of everything. It's not coming, what do you want to say, forward. it's going back. The shadows are going back. You can't hardly see any. Well, the reason for that is because and that was just an old light. First of all, it was a fluorescent one, and I changed that to an LED panel. They're fairly inexpensive, and so I changed that to an LED panel. And if you kind of look, if you look, let me get my mouse going here. Right down here where my operating position and my keyboard is, if you notice, the light is placed, and it just happened to work out this way, but it's just a little bit in front of me. If it was behind me, then I'd have a little more of a problem. But it's just in front of where I would sit. So I got pretty even lighting right on the desk. That's probably helped more than anything. This is another example. This is an old picture of my old ham shack. And I tried to do sort of the same thing, but here we had canned lighting. But when I did finish this basement, I put the canned lights here. So they're coming down this way. My operating position is more over here and down. That's probably, for me, again, one of the bigger things is to have even lighting if you can and get rid of any shadows. If you look at the shadows and you think about it at the end of the night or day when you're operating, um, you'll know it. You'll know if your lighting is right just by how you feel about things. The other thing is sometimes maybe you're going to operate a long time, but oh, after a number of hours, your eyes might be a little tired, or if you're at field day, you don't really have optimum conditions. I try to use a lighted keyboard, and it makes it easier. You can turn your room lights down a little bit, but still you can see typing, and they're not terribly expensive. So I try to always use a lighted keyboard. One thing I will point out is the one on the left here. That is a full-size keyboard, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you don't have all the space available of maybe having a real wide desk. And I've been in situations like that. Or if you're doing POTA or something like that and you are using a computer. So what I did is I got a somewhat inexpensive keyboard like the one on the right. So what you did is you got rid of the keys over here. It still has all the functions, but it saved you some space uh, in the width of the keyboard, and that allows you just to have a little more room in tight restraints. Okay, sound. That's obviously a big important thing. If you can't hear them, obviously you can't work them, but you got to be able to hear them. The sound coming out of radios is probably better nowadays than it ever has been, but when you get right down to it, it's still only about a 3-inch speaker in there. Ideally, here's an example is, and they didn't cost very much, but this was actually a speaker that I just put on the top of my radio here, and that cost like maybe $11. It came from Dell, but the point would be that it gets the sound up and out of your radio and more toward you, and that helps really a lot. And it wasn't real expensive. Um, It works well. You can do it another way if you want. In my old ham shack, I had 2 speakers, one right over here, which is the right one. I did have this one that's actually kind of behind this monitor, but I had the left one over here. And then I actually had a subwoofer on the ground, on the floor, I should say. That worked really good as well. But I don't have that situation now. I don't have the room for it. So I did the speaker on here, and I bought one, and again it was like maybe $11 somewhere in there. I'm sure you could probably still buy them off of eBay. And I just put it on the radio and you plug it in the external speaker jack and off you go. Headphones, that's a big deal. If you are operating and you got other people around or other noises, um, headphones is kind of a must if you're really trying to work some DX and they're not real loud. or you just really want to concentrate on things. So the big thing is trying to find a comfortable pair of headphones. And what is comfortable for me may not be comfortable for you. There's a lot of different brands out there. Audio Technica, I think, is one. Heil Radio or Heil Sound, they have a number of them, but you don't have to go spend necessarily $125 to $200 on Heil headphones. There's other good ones out there that don't cost near that much, $25 maybe, and they work well. But again, if you've got other room noises, you're going to have headphones. I can tell you many years ago when I was looking at the cement walls and I had headphones on and I didn't think too much about it, but the furnace was about 7 feet away from me. And I was kind of half dozing off a little bit, just listening on 20 meters. And I was just kind of back in my chair listening. And I did have an amplifier. It wasn't a desktop amp, it was a pedestal type of amp. And one thing with amplifiers, especially the old tube type amplifiers, is there is a condition sometimes that can exist, and you can have a parasitic event happen in the amplifier, and it can scare the daylights out of you if you're not careful. Well, I didn't think too much about anything, and I've got the amp going, and I'm just kind of half dozing off. The problem was that the furnace started up, and it was one where, of course, you had the exhaust fan start for about a minute or so, and then it had the electronic ignition. So all of a sudden, I'm woken up quickly with this tick, 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 tick of the electronic ignition, and I think the damn amp is blowing up. And I jumped out of that chair faster than you could shake a stick at. I'll always remember that, hearing that stupid igniter. But that's irrelevant. The point would be, if you're going to do anything, you have other people around, if you can. And noise canceling headphones work real well if you can get them. I know Bose makes those and they work real good. They're not inexpensive necessarily, but they work well. Okay, then we get to ergonomics, and this is totally up to you, what you're comfortable with. Is everything within reach? Where is each item placed? Do you have to strain to get at anything? Here's an example. Now, I'm right-handed, so typically what I'm going to do is, and actually this is a better picture of it, I'm right-handed. So what I do is I have the radio placed here. I've got the general tuning dial or VFO on the right side. This is my rotor control, and the controls for that, they're on the right side. My mouse is on the right side. My CW key is on the right side. The telephone's on the right side. This is just an additional VFO tuning knob for my radio. That's on the right side. I'm going to go back and notice on the left side, there's not much. A stapler here. This is for my 2-meter rig, which is there, but the microphone is here, but I'm not using that much. And then this is just an antenna switch, which I don't really touch much. And this is my power supply. So everything that I really don't have to touch much, I always put on the left side because I'm left-handed. This is a power meter. This is actually a power meter for the 2-meter stuff. Again, I don't touch it, and so it's on the left side. I try to leave everything that I don't have to touch much on the left side, except that's where if I have like coffee or pop or whatever you're going to have, I'll have that on the left side. Everything else is done for me because I'm very dominant right-handed. Has anybody got any questions so far? Okay. The last thing is safety. Now, if you got one of those things or a cat, be careful of that. You don't want them injured, hurt, or whatever, and it happens and you don't know about it. So here's a thing that I did, and I try to do this with my ham shack now even. This is from years ago, but the point would be try to get as much stuff off the floor as possible. That's really the key. And, and again, if you have animals, try to really watch it if you have them in your ham shack area. They like to chew, especially if they're young. They're going to chew on stuff a little bit till they get older. And the more you can keep off the floor, the safer you're going to be. And they are going to be. So I tried to really keep those cables off the floor. You notice this is a common point ground, by the way. All this is a ground for the radio. This is the common point ground going out, and it actually goes outside. Here's another example. That's probably one of the bigger things is having a common point ground. When I mention that, what that means is in my old house, I had just a bunch of stuff on my tower and everything. So this aluminum plate was the common point ground. In fact, right here where my pointer is where the ground was that went outside. But everything bonded to the aluminum plate. All the coaxes, the lightning arresters, every control line was bonded actually to that aluminum plate. Then it went to here, and that went outside. You want to do everything so that you daisy chain your grounds. Don't have multiple grounds going outside to a common point. Have all your grounds going to a common point like here on the inside. This one actually goes outside. This is just from my radio, very similar to my old setup. I took all my coaxes and I just made a little plate here, and all my coaxes have a bulkhead connector. This one here is what was going into that copper ground bus underneath my desk. All the coaxes go here, so all the shields are grounded, and this is actually the ground wire. It goes up the wall and it comes out here, and you can't see it real well, but where it is right here. And I've got the ground rod right here. You want to try and keep them as short as possible if you can, but you want to use some wide, and that's about probably 3/4 inch wide braid. And you can buy it, or you can use old coax. That's really good coax. And you can take the braids and actually you can put a braid in another braid and try to get as more conduction surface and I ran it outside here, and this is my common point ground. It goes inside and again back under the desk to here. This goes to the radio, and if I grounded anything else, those ground wires would go to these additional screws here. The reason to do it that way is because if you don't do it that way and you run, let's say, multiple ground wires to the outside instead of having a common bus inside, is you will get a ground loop. Sometimes RF is funny stuff, and it can circulate, so to speak, come back in, and then you'll get RF in the shack. And as you're talking, someone will say, your audio doesn't necessarily sound real good. It's kind of fuzzy, I guess is the best word. And that tells you probably you got a ground loop and you're getting some RF into your audio. So the best thing to do is just have a common ground braid going outside to your ground wire. And again, coming in, and you can daisy chain things together in a row. You just don't want them in parallel. You want them in series to the ground bus and then outside. Another thing I thought about, and this again goes back to when we had 3 kids at home, and I thought, well, what happens if they go down and they go, gee whiz, I went a fool with Dad's radio, and I don't think he's going to care. And gee whiz, it says on, off, or power. I think I'll turn that on. I didn't feel like meeting the FCC personnel based on those conditions. And so what I did is I took and I had this panel that I added, and you could put it pretty much anywhere you want, but that had relays in it. And what I did then is I took over here on my operating desk, and I had a key switch, and that key switch would take 12 volts and it would turn on the relays, and those relays would provide 110 and 220 for the radio. So if I wasn't operating, I would take this key switch and I would take it out, throw it in a drawer, my pocket, or whatever you want to do. But no one could run my radio equipment without that key switch, and that's kind of important. Again, kids being kids and being inquisitive, and they see you do things, and if you're not around, excuse me, I didn't want to really offer that opportunity to them. So I did it that way, just some relays that would turn on a 220 outlet and some 110-volt outlets. All my radio stuff was plugged in that. You could not plug it in anywhere else. And I just used the relay with the key switch and obviously never had a problem. The other thing is trying to keep things neat and get your tools put away. There's nothing worse than whether it be you're working on a car or anything around the house, and you go, doggone it, I know that tool was there. It had to be there somewhere. Where did that tool go? Well, needless to say, if someone borrowed it and didn't put it back, it drives you nuts, or you just don't remember where you put the tool. So I try to be fairly neat in things and get things organized. And even my wife, Sheila, can say, where is such and such? And I can say, it's in the gray cabinet, second shelf down, left-hand side, about 4 inches back from the front. It's right there. And so I try to keep things neat and organized, get them put away so that they don't get, someone doesn't walk off with them or, does something and you go, I know it was there yesterday or last week, and it's not there. So that's a little bit as to my belief of what I did and just some things to think about when you set up your ham shack. The other thing would be that I observed is if you have to move your head up or down to look at your monitor, maybe try to move the monitor so you don't have to do that. Moving it from side to side, or if you just have one monitor, that which I did for many years, if it's just natural for you to move your head and look at the monitor, that's fine. But if you've got to wrench your head up, down, up this way to look at your monitor, or down this way to look at it, you're going to get your neck's going to get tired. So monitor placement is probably a big thing. Radio placement, like I said, if you're left-handed, think about it and make things, try to be as dominant as you can on your left side. But those are my observations of making operating your radio just a little more fun. You get rid of the things that might bother you, whether it be a back problem or cold floor or whatever. So that is the end of things.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions about anything?
Thank you, Kurt. I appreciate that. I think I found it helpful, and I know we have some newer people on tonight too, and one of them was actually really looking forward to this. So I appreciate your time.
Well, again, it's only some observations that I made, and the way I developed those was being way on the other end of not having any of these thoughts or even the provisions of trying to do that.